The fact that we're increasing our greenhouse gas emissions, even though we're seeing clear evidence of climate change and very, very significant impacts from those climate changes, does result in a degree of frustration in me and other scientists, because we've actually had enough science to make clear decisions and good decisions for at least 20 years now. I'm Emeritus Professor Mark Howden. I'm affiliated with ANU and also a Vice Chair of the IPCC. So I've had a long engagement with the IPCC going back to 1990. And so I've seen it evolve. It's staffed by a small secretariat, but then most of the work is actually done by the science community across the globe. They're the people who scope the assessments, they write the chapters, they review the chapters, and in fact, I often characterised it as the biggest single science policy activity in the history of humankind. So the science can provide information into the consequences of different, for example, global temperatures, but it's governments who actually have to take in that information and then come up with some agreed global goals.
The eyes of the world have been on Paris for weeks.
The Paris Agreement, in setting its goals, was fundamentally informed by the science and particularly by the IPCC. And so that's, in a sense, a big tick for the science community. However, since then, what we've seen is instead of greenhouse gas emissions starting to flatten out and then go down, what we've actually seen is those emissions continue to go up. If we continue on our pathway in terms of emissions, we're likely to suffer much more from climate extremes. That's going to cause significant consequences in terms of pretty much every sector that we have. So disruption to food supplies and food securities, to water supply, to energy supply, etc. And economic analyses show that that could actually be a huge hit to GDP. So something in the region of 14% reduction in GDP per degree Celsius. I think it is important for scientists to respond to those people who are ignoring the evidence or have a denialist approach to this. That group is actually very small. It's probably about 7% across the nation, even though most people think it's much bigger. It tends to be quite a noisy group who tend to be overrepresented in public debates. The other important part is actually being faithful to the science itself and being able to say very clearly what the science can and can't say about this particular complex topic and what we might need to do to actually have more clear answers. ANU has been a really great place to put in action some of the ideas that come from the science community. One of my really high moments in ANU was where I formed the Institute for Climate, Energy and Disaster Solutions. That is a unique institution right across the globe, bringing those different and interconnected aspects of climate change together. Being elected to the Australian Academy of Science is a highlight of my career, particularly in terms of recognition of the different types of science that I've engaged in and how we've actually changed the world through that science.